Hello there. My name is Raouf. If you know me, you probably know that I like to ask a lot of questions that people don't like to be asked. Like why are you wearing that? Why are you doing that? Why do you sound like that? But one question I haven't asked yet, and I'm asking now in this video is democracy declining? Yes or no? By democracy declining, I don't just mean like, for example, when you wake up in the news and see a new democratic government elected in whatever country, a country that you might not think is democratic, but it shows that they are democratic. The way democracy has been deceived to be shown to us as something that's around the world a common thing, I think that most of it, if not all countries follow, it's disgusting, it's weird, and it's just unhealthy, and it shows the lies that we are forced to live in under government. But first of all, I think the only good thing that these people that lie about democracy do is dress good. Unfortunately, I'm not dressed that good. So just give me 1 minute. I think that's much better. I also think my attire is way more slick than democracy is right now. Democracy started as a dream for people to be able to say whatever they want, however they want, to fight for a cause that they believe in their minds. And you could say that this has been a positive on human interaction or humanity as a whole. Democracy, especially in the United States, has been what people try to follow. The United States has been a democratic country for a very long time. However, especially about the United States, when you start to think about, is it really that democratic, or is there something going on behind the show? For example, in the United States, you have two parties, the Republican and the Democratic parties. These two parties are basically the only parties across the United States. While there's other parties, they don't get voted, they don't get enough campaign money, they don't get the right TV interaction for Americans to see them. It's always a 1v1. You're either blue or red. You're either from Texas or from California. You either have a mindset that everything comes from hard work and dedication, or you have a mindset to get smarter and richer as fast as you can. Overall, there's no real choice here, especially in American elections. Now, when you look at this graph behind me, I think it's just stunning some of the information that's been written here. Like you see here, a majority of countries live in partially free and non-free democratic state. We'll get back to that, but that's very confusing. For example, you have 38% that are not free, 20% that are free, and 42% that are partially free. If we really sit down with each other, what does partially free even mean? Like, when the government's in a good mood, they're gonna let us talk or they're gonna let us say our opinions? It doesn't make any sense. When you have 20%, only 20% of the world's population or world countries giving their people the gratitude or the gift that is freedom, it really makes you think that something is wrong. Something needs to change. The 38% that are not free is mostly African, Arab, and some European countries who let their democracy shown worldwide as a democracy, but it's really just an autocracy that doesn't show only to its people. Lastly, in 2023, we have freedom limited or declined 22%. It really makes you think, like, what are we doing here? For freedom to decline 22% in a single year, so many more countries and so many more people in power are going down the track of stopping freedom, stopping democracy. Stuff like this, stuff like these statistics really make you think, is democracy really still there? Is it dying? Is it dead? We have to figure it out. Now, let me go a bit off topic. This man right here, his name is Idi Amin. You might ask, what's his importance to all of this? Idi Amin was a Ugandan dictator in the late 90s. The stuff that this man did was unspeakable, unthinkable, and just unhumane. Now, like most dictators or most undemocratic people, Idi was a military man who overthrew the government forcefully just because he wanted more power than he already had as the head military of the country. Idi killed over 200 to 250,000 Ugandans who stood up against him in the Ugandan revolution. Idi took Uganda from in the grasp of his hand, doing whatever he wanted with it. Lastly, Uganda, economic state at the time of before Idi, was actually pretty good. But sadly, as Idi came, the stuff that was making the economic state of Uganda good left. A large Asian population was living in Uganda due to its natural resources ability and the ability to grow many crops and other farm-like things that help not just Uganda but the outside world by selling that stuff. So Uganda was the real winner here. Idi came and excluded all those Asians. Those who tried to stay democratically or physically were killed. He is not a good person nor leader. He was one of the worst dictators known to mankind. But sadly, there is one thing that he did say that has reshaped how I look at democracy now. As you can see here, Idi said, and I quote, "There is freedom of speech, but I cannot guarantee freedom after speech." I think this explains democracy as a whole right now. I think democracy right now is perfectly summed up in a way where people are allowed to say what they think, are allowed to express what they think at certain times. But even if they are, after that, they're forced to shut up right after that. No second chances, no actual freedom of speech. Just an overview to be shown to the people that, hey, you're allowed to say your opinion, but then that person gets their opinion mostly taken away from them. This quote by Idi, which comes from one of the worst dictators, like I said, one of the worst dictators, history-wide, worldwide, really shows you that democracy isn't declining just now. It has been declining for years. Also, pretty sadly, I think Idi, if you were alive today, would pretty much agree with this chart here that's scrolling down. Now, I scrolled down just to show a good amount of countries, but as you can see, only at the beginning of the list we have countries that are described as working democracies, and they're not even described as democracies yet. They're working democracies. There's still issues that they have to encounter, yet they're doing their job and doing well. However, after that, it's just sad how the level of freedom is now looked around across the world. After working democracies, all you have is deficient democracies, hybrid regimes, and all types of other crises you can think about. The amount of countries that have scraped the idea of freedom and the idea of democracy is just sad. How it's been a norm now, based on this chart, as you can see, that more than half, or actually way more than half of the countries in the world are not democratic. It really makes you think, what are we doing wrong? What are they doing wrong? And how can we fix this? Now, sadly, I think if you want to think about how can we fix the issue of the decline of democracy, we have to start with the rich people. Now, if you want to admit it or not, rich people run the world. Rich people run the countries that we live in. Take this for example. Do you really think a government or a regime would go under serious pressure just because the people are protesting? That the people are raising their voices? That the people want change? With all due respect, the middle class and lower class, these people, the government doesn't care about them. Governments and dictators and people who deny them of freedom, they don't care about them because they wouldn't. If they cared about them, they would have listened to their or what they wanted without abusing them, stopping them from talking, imprisoning them. So we've established that they don't care about them. What keeps them in power is the rich people. Now the rich people, they invest in them, they give them their full support, and they help with the country's economic state or the country's economic wealth, and will support the economic wealth of those running the government itself. So the rich people run the world, run the countries they live in. If we want to help the little guy, we have to convince the big guy to help us take out the bigger guy, if that makes sense. It starts with convincing the rich people to have a bit of integrity, to say your pockets aren't the most important thing. What's important is the people that are living in the streets, unable to eat, unable to drink, because of the country that are being run poorly. And when they look for change, there is no change. Take us, for example, as Egyptians. Egypt has had presidents stay for over 30 to 35 years. There is no absolute way you can convince me that a president or a single man or woman should stay in power for more than 30 years. Just way too much. Literally, just way too much. For example, when you had the revolution in Egypt in 2011, that revolution was a 30-day or 32-day revolution where people died, people lost their family, lost their friends to free the country. But the thing is, orders to step down of Hosni Mubarak were way before this. Orders for him to step down were in 2009, 2008. But the thing is, they didn't care. When the rich people, rich Egyptian businessmen started to say, no, we need change, we need the better for our country, that's when his regime fell. Now, Egypt tried democracy in 2013 when they elected Mohamed Morsi as their president. Whatever what you believe about him, yes, he was part of the Muslim Brotherhood, but it doesn't matter what you believe about him. What matters is that he was elected. People elected him. 51% of Egypt's overgrown population elected him. And what you did, you told the country that another 50 disagreed with him in power. Doesn't make sense. In an election, you're supposed to have 50 here and 50 here, or 45 here, 55 here. It doesn't make sense that they ousted a president just because they said that half of the country didn't like him. Of course, half of the country isn't going to like him. It's normal. And it was also their right to protest that they didn't like him and to protest for him to step down. But it wasn't the military's right to step in and make him step down. In the end, we tried a democracy where a president, no matter what, is supposed to stay in power for those 4 years he was elected in. Sadly, he didn't. He was ousted. The military came swooping back in to take power, in which they have power till this day and have limited freedom of speech, freedom of media, freedom of basically anything. Me, for example, I've never been told that I can't go to the football stadium and wear a certain number because that means something politically or means something to the government. I'm sorry, but I don't think this should be allowed in any different countries, and we need people in our beloved country, Egypt, those in power and those rich people, to step up for the better of the country. As we come to the end of my video, let's go back to the question in which we started the video with. Is democracy in decline? Yes or no? The obvious yet sad answer is yes. Democracy has been in decline for a very, very long time. Even the countries in which we see as democratic, as the United States, for example, they give you two parties to choose from. That's not democracy. That's a multiple choice question. You have to choose one, even if you disagree with both, which a lot of Americans do. You are forced to choose one just because they feel like it, just because that's what they think is better for the country. They don't care what's better for you. They want one of those parties in power. They don't care about you. A lot of countries are doing the same thing, faking democracies or giving limited democratic abilities to the people. This is not what Abraham Lincoln fought for. This is not what the Greeks fought for when they created democracy. They fought for freedom. They fought for justice. And they fought for the right to say whatever the people wanted to say or believed. The amount of countries that willingly and surprisingly say that they don't have democracy or are not democratic is also absurd. Idi Amin might have had the guts to say that in an interview in the 1970s, in a time where democracy was still supposed to be on its rise. He had the guts to say that. leaders now don't have the guts to say that, but you can see what they mean when they stop elections just because they feel like it, when they play with the Constitution like it's an Xbox game just because they feel like it, giving themselves more time to run, giving themselves more time to stay in power. It's just speechless, something that makes me speechless, something that makes me sad, something that makes the idea of freedom in my mind, me going in to my 20s now, going into the best years of my life, the ability or the inability of me not being free, it just scares me, it makes me disappointed, it makes me wish I was born earlier. I hope we as people can continue to take stands, can continue to try to make things better, continue to try to say no, we want to be free, we want to have opinions, we want to have elections, we want to have protests, we want to have change. Because without that, they're just going to keep running all over our face. Thank you. Democracy always. Have a good day.